Howdy folks, let's talk about the index function. It's one of the most useful functions in spreadsheets, and it's a little bit intimidating at first, but it's well worth the effort to learn. And in this lesson we're going to focus on just the index function. I have another lesson about just the match function, and then a third lesson when we'll see about putting them together to build the classic index match combination. So let's just talk about the index though for this lesson. So let me show you a very basic example. So I have this table here, and it just has some weeks across the column headings and some products as the row headings, and it just tells me that there were, say for example in week 2 for product 3 there were 19 let's say sales, 19 sales of product 3 in week 2. So index, it's just like looking something up in an address book really. It returns the contents of a cell specified by a row and column offset. So we choose our range. So I want to, these are the bounds if you like of where my values are that I'm going to return something from. And then I say, so we'll fix that, and then I tell it how many rows down. So we want to look at product 3, so it's 1, 2, 3 rows down. And then I said week 2, and that was 2 across. So we're looking for one right in the middle of our data set. And I'm going to close the parentheses. So 3, how many rows down I go, and then 2 is how many columns across I go. Hit enter, and it gives me 19. I can also do things like omit one of these references. So let's see what happens when I do that. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this into here, except this time I'm going to omit that row reference and just leave it blank like that. Hit enter, and this time what happens is it gives me the whole row back. So you can see it goes from 39 to 43. So that's quite nice just to know that property. Similarly, if I put it here and I skip that last one, so I just leave the column out, I don't need to have the comma there at the end. What it does is it just gives me back the whole row if I omit the column reference. Again, so that's a nice property to know about. Okay, so that's the static one, which isn't that useful because I don't want to have to keep typing in these numbers. But we can of course make that dynamic by just referencing cells. So I'll just quickly show you that. We'll just copy this in here. And let's have a look at this dynamic example. So say if I want to go 1 row down and 1 column down, then my formula is going to be index of this whole set. Let's just lock it for fun. And then this time I'm going to reference in column J. It's actually just behind this. If I just X out of that for now, I want my row to be this one, and then I want my column to be this one here. Close the parentheses, and it gives me 38, which is obviously that first one. Now let's see if I change the row to, I want to go all the way down to row 6, then it changes to 8. If I want to go then across to column 3, it should give me 21, which it does. So that's the dynamic version. Now let me show you something else that's super cool with index. A really sneaky trick, and it's how we can build dynamic ranges with the index function. Let's have a look at doing a dynamic range example. So dynamic range. This is where things get a little bit wacky. So let me build this formula up. So we'll start with just a quick count A, and we'll do A to A. So that tells me there are 8 items at the moment in that column. Then I want to do the index of A to A, and I want to use that count A, and all that's going to do is just return that last value. So if this was 88, it would just return that 88. But now this is where it gets really interesting. So let's copy this formula down, or more, and it's the same formula there. If I now put an A1 in front of this, what it actually is doing is it's no longer returning 88 from that. In fact, what it's actually doing is returning the reference of the cell reference, which in this case would be A8. And then what I end up with is a range that goes from A1 to A8. So if I hit enter, you see that now it's given me that whole range. So let me delete those two now, those working columns, and let's just move that one up. So this is a really interesting property of the index function. If you look, when I add more numbers, they just get added on to that range, and this one grows automatically for me. So I can do things like, for example, let's say I wanted to find the first 5 values of my data set. The formula can just be modified a little bit. So we're going to say A1, and we'll do index A, except this time we'll just do 5. We'll just return the first 5, and there it gives me the first 5 values. If I wanted to do the last 5 values, this gets a little more tricky. So what I first need to do is work out where the 5th one back is, and then add the end one in. So we're going to have to do 2 index functions and then put them together with the colon. So we'll do A to A, then we need to count A to A, and then I need to subtract 4 which is going to give me that one that's 5 back. So if I work back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, that's the 5th one. And then if I now, let's copy this, and we'll just apply that same one again, except we'll get rid of the 4 this time. Then this one here is the last value, and so it's going to give me the numbers then from A8 up to A12, and there's the last 5 values. Now this is really interesting because if I add on, let's add one more on, 13, you see it automatically updating for me, 15. So I can just use this to create, for example, a rolling average. So we'll do a 5-day rolling average calc. So this is really interesting, really useful, and you wouldn't know this about the index property necessarily without having seen this before. So that's the average of the last 5. So that's from 11 to 15. Let's add on 100, say, and let's check the average is 30 now, and that goes from 12 to 100. Average is 30.8, 30.8. So there we go. So that's a really handy and sneaky thing you can do with the index, which is that it actually returns a cell reference, not just the value that's inside the cell. And you can use that to do some really interesting constructions with these dynamic ranges. So thanks folks, that's all with the index function.